They didn't just write songs, they rewired the entire DNA of modern music. From basement rehearsal spaces to stadiums that held hundreds of thousands, these bands didn't follow the rules of rock and roll. They invented them. Today we're counting down the top 10 greatest rock bands of all time. But this isn't just another opinion list thrown together from nostalgia and personal favorites. This ranking is built on hard data, sales figures, chart performance, critical acclaim, industry awards, documented influence, and cultural impact measured across decades. We've normalized metrics, weighted categories, and cross-referenced every major music publication's rankings to arrive at something as close to objective truth as you can get in the subject world of rock and roll. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps us keep these deep dives coming. Stick around until the end because we've got 5 honorable mentions that just barely missed the cut. Let's get started. When Nevermind hit store shelves in September 1991, nobody, not the band, not the label, not even the most optimistic A&R rep, predicted what would happen next. Within months, Kurt Cobain's anguished howl and that now iconic guitar riff from Smells Like Teen Spirit did not just climb the charts, they detonated the entire landscape of rock music. Nirvana single-handedly brought alternative rock from the underground to the mainstream, ending the hair metal era overnight and defining Generation X in the process. They accomplished this in just 7 years as a band with only 3 studio albums. The cultural impact was disproportionate to their brief career, but the ripple effects are still felt today in every alternative and indie rock band that followed. Named to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014, Nirvana proved that raw authenticity could triumph over polished production, that vulnerability could be powerful, and that 3 chords and the truth could change everything. The grunge movement they spearheaded gave voice to a generation's disillusionment and reshaped rock's aesthetic for the decade to come. 7 years, 3 albums, 1 undeniable revolution. Number 9, the Jimi Hendrix Experience. 4 years, that's all Jimi Hendrix had. From 1966 to 1970, across just 3 studio albums, he completely revolutionized what the electric guitar could do and what rock music could sound like. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame calls him arguably the greatest instrumentalist in rock history, and that's not hyperbole. Before Hendrix, feedback was something guitarists tried to avoid. He turned it into an instrument. Distortion wasn't a mistake, it was a voice. Effects pedals weren't gimmicks, they were paintbrushes, and Hendrix was creating sonic landscapes nobody had even imagined possible. Watch footage of Hendrix at Monterey Pop or Woodstock and you're witnessing the bridge between blues tradition and psychedelic exploration being built in real time. He took the guitar work of blues legends like Muddy Waters and B.B. King and launched it into the stratosphere, influencing every rock guitarist who picked up an instrument after him, from Eddie Van Halen to John Frusciante to contemporary players still trying to decode his techniques. Purple Haze, All Along the Watchtower, Voodoo Child, these aren't just songs, they're doctoral theses on what 6 strings and an amplifier can achieve. The fact that he accomplished all of this before his death at just 27 years old makes it all the more staggering. Number 8, AC/DC. If aliens landed on Earth and asked for one band that would explain the essence of rock and roll, you would hand them Back in Black and walk away. That's AC/DC, stripped down, turned up, and absolutely relentless. With over 200 million records sold worldwide, and Back in Black standing as one of the best-selling albums of all time at over 50 million copies, AC/DC defined the hard rock blueprint. But here's what makes them extraordinary. They have maintained the most consistent sound in rock history while remaining massively influential and commercially successful for 5 decades. The formula seems simple. Angus Young's schoolboy outfit, Malcolm Young's thundering rhythm guitar, that unmistakable crunch tone, and vocals that sound like they are being shouted through a megaphone from the back of a speeding truck. But simplicity at this level is genius. Songs like Highway to Hell, You Shook Me All Night Long, and Thunderstruck are so perfectly constructed that they feel like they have always existed, carved into the bedrock of rock itself. While other bands experimented, evolved, and sometimes lost their way, AC/DC stayed the course. They proved that you do not need to reinvent yourself with every album when you have already achieved perfection. Their influence on hard rock and heavy metal is immeasurable, and their live shows remain some of the most electrifying experiences in rock music. Pure, powerful, permanent. Number 7. Black Sabbath. February 13th, 1970. Black Sabbath released their self-titled debut album. The opening track begins with the sound of rain, church bells, and then Tony Iommi's guitar, down-tuned, ominous, unlike anything the world had heard before. In that moment, heavy metal was born. Black Sabbath didn't just create a sound, they invented an entire genre. Before Sabbath, rock music was about rebellion, sure, but it was also about love, peace, and good vibrations. Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward brought something darker, heavier, more menacing. They wrote about war, depression, the occult, and the darker corners of human experience. Paranoid, Master of Reality, Volume 4, and their debut album created the blueprint that every metal band that followed would build upon. Doom metal, stoner rock, thrash, death metal, all of it traces back to that thunderous down-tuned guitar tone and the apocalyptic atmosphere Sabbath pioneered. Tony Iommi's guitar work, shaped in part by a factory accident that took the tips of 2 of his fingers, created the sonic template for heavy guitar music. His riffs are the foundation of metal, studied and worshipped by generations of players. The cultural impact on metal and hard rock cannot be overstated. Without Black Sabbath, the entire landscape of heavy music simply does not exist. They didn't just play it heavy, they invented heavy. Number 6. The Who. Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1990, The Who took rock music and asked a question nobody had thought to ask before. What if rock could tell a story, a real story, with acts and characters and narrative arcs? The answer was Tommy in 1969, rock's first true opera, followed by Quadrophenia in 1973. Pete Townsend didn't just write songs, he composed movements, created characters, and built worlds. The Who pioneered the integration of synthesizers and electronic elements into rock music, pushing boundaries while maintaining raw, visceral power. But The Who were also architects of the live rock experience as we know it. Roger Daltrey's microphone twirling, Townsend's windmill guitar technique, Keith Moon's chaotic brilliance on the drum kit, and John Entwistle's bass playing, which often functioned more like a lead instrument, created the template for arena rock performance. The destruction of instruments on stage wasn't just theatrical. It was a statement that rock and roll was temporary, explosive, and gloriously self-destructive. Their influence on punk rock and alternative music is massive. Bands like the Ramones, The Clash, and Pearl Jam all cite The Who as foundational. My Generation Baba O'Reilly won't get fooled again. These songs don't just endure, they define what rock rebellion sounds like. The Who proved that rock could be intelligent, theatrical, and experimental while still maintaining its essential rawness and power. Number 5. Queen. 300 million records sold, one of the most innovative songs in rock history, and the single greatest live performance ever captured on film. That's Queen. When Bohemian Rhapsody hit radio in 1975, it broke every rule, a 6-minute epic with opera sections, no chorus, multiple movements, and lyrics that remain beautifully cryptic to this day. It should not have worked. Instead, it became one of rock's most beloved and analyzed masterpieces, proving that Freddie Mercury's vision knew no boundaries. Queen pioneered stadium rock and theatrical performance, turning concerts into events that blurred the line between rock show and grand opera. Their genius was versatility. They could do glam rock, hard rock, disco, pop, progressive rock, and make it all sound unmistakably like Queen. We Will Rock You, Somebody to Love, Under Pressure, Radio Gaga. Each song inhabits a different musical universe, yet they are all unified by Mercury's unparalleled voice and the band's fearless creativity. Then came Live Aid on July 13th, 1985, 20 minutes at Wembley Stadium, Freddie Mercury commanding 72,000 people in the venue, and an estimated 1.9 billion watching worldwide. Music critics, fellow musicians, and fans universally agree it remains the greatest live rock performance ever captured. Mercury turned a charity concert into a masterclass in how to own a stage, how to connect with an audience, and how to remind the world what charisma looks like when it is weaponized. Cross-generational appeal, unprecedented genre versatility, and a frontman who redefined what a rock star could be. That's the legacy. Number 4. Pink Floyd. The Dark Side of the Moon, released in 1973, spent 740 consecutive weeks on the Billboard 200. That is over 14 years. It is one of the best-selling albums of all time, with over 250 million records sold worldwide by Pink Floyd. But the numbers do not capture what Pink Floyd actually did. They pioneered progressive rock and the concept album as an art form. Before Pink Floyd, albums were collections of songs. After Pink Floyd, albums could be singular experiences, sonic journeys with themes, recurring motifs, and narrative threads woven throughout. The Dark Side of the Moon explored mental illness, mortality, time, and greed. The Wall examined isolation, trauma, and the barriers we build. These were not just records, they were philosophical statements delivered through sound. Their revolutionary use of studio technology and sound design influenced every experimental rock band that followed. The synthesizers, the tape loops, the found sounds, the way silence was used as powerfully as noise show how Pink Floyd treated the recording studio as an instrument itself. Roger Waters' vision, combined with David Gilmour's soaring guitar work and Richard Wright's atmospheric keyboards, created music that was as much about texture and mood as melody and rhythm. Songs like Comfortably Numb, Wish You Were Here, and Time are not just tracks. They are experiences that reveal new layers with every listen. Pink Floyd proved that rock could be cerebral, atmospheric, and deeply emotional all at once, creating a sonic blueprint for progressive and experimental rock that endures decades later. Number 3. The Rolling Stones, the highest grossing live rock band in history, with over $2.9 billion in touring revenue, over 250 million records sold, and still going after more than 60 years. The Rolling Stones are not just a band, they are a force of nature. While the Beatles represented the polished, experimental side of the British invasion, the Stones were raw, dangerous, and unapologetically rebellious. They embodied rock and roll's primal spirit, the swagger, the attitude, and the refusal to grow old gracefully or quietly. Mick Jagger's strut, Keith Richards' indestructible riff mastery, and a rhythm section that could make any room shake defined what it meant to be a rock and roll band. Satisfaction, Sympathy for the Devil, Gimme Shelter, Start Me Up. The catalog is staggering. But beyond the hits, the Stones revolutionized touring economics and live performance standards. They proved that rock bands could sustain massive commercial success across decades. That reinvention was not necessary when you had already perfected the sound, and that rock and roll could be a lifelong career, not just a young man's game. 6 decades of consistent output. 6 decades of sold-out stadiums. 6 decades of proving that rock and roll is not about perfection, it is about passion, energy, and the refusal to fade away. The Rolling Stones took the blues, electrified it, and turned it into the longest-running show in rock history. They are, quite simply, the world's greatest rock and roll band. Number 2. Led Zeppelin. Over 300 million records sold. Led Zeppelin 4 is one of the best-selling albums of all time at over 37 million copies. Stairway to Heaven is widely considered the greatest rock song ever recorded, but even those staggering achievements do not fully capture what Led Zeppelin meant to rock music. They pioneered hard rock and heavy metal, taking the blues foundation and amplifying it literally and figuratively into something heavier, louder, and more mystical than anything that came before. Jimmy Page's guitar work, whether it is the crushing riff of Whole Lotta Love or the delicate acoustic intro to Stairway to Heaven, set the standard every rock guitarist since has chased. John Bonham's drumming on When the Levee Breaks did not just keep time, it created earthquakes. Robert Plant's vocals soared and wailed with a power and range that defined what a rock vocalist could be. But Zeppelin's genius was their range. They could do thunderous hard rock, as on Immigrant Song, delicate folk, as on Going to California, blues, as on Since I've Been Loving You, and Eastern influence experimentation, as on Kashmir, with equal mastery. They proved that heavy did not mean one-dimensional, that power could coexist with subtlety. Their influence on virtually every hard rock and metal band that followed is absolute. Without Led Zeppelin, the sonic landscape of heavy music would be unrecognizable. They took rock to its furthest extremes, the loudest, the heaviest, the most epic, and in doing so, they created a blueprint that endures as the gold standard. Page, Plant, Jones, Bonham, together they were untouchable. Number 1, the Beatles. Virtually unanimous across every methodology, every ranking, every analysis. Over 600 million records sold worldwide, the most of any artist in history. Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1988, and a cultural impact that remains unmatched 6 decades after they first appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show. The Beatles didn't just make rock music, they transformed it from a singles-driven format into an album-oriented art form. Before Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, albums were collections of hits with filler. After it, albums were statements, concepts, cohesive artistic visions. They revolutionized recording techniques, pushing Abbey Road Studios and producer George Martin to innovate multi-tracking, tape loops, backwards recording, and orchestral integration in ways that every band since has built upon. But here's what makes the Beatles untouchable. They influenced every subsequent rock genre. Hard rock, psychedelic rock, progressive rock, pop rock, folk rock, all of it traces back to innovations the Beatles introduced. From the raw simplicity of I Want to Hold Your Hand to the experimental complexity of A Day in the Life, they evolved constantly while maintaining perfect songcraft. John Lennon and Paul McCartney's songwriting partnership is the most successful in history. George Harrison's guitar work and spiritual explorations opened new doors. Ringo Starr's drumming, often underrated, provided the perfect foundation. Together, they created a catalog that remains the measuring stick for every rock band. Hey Jude, Let It Be, Come Together, Yesterday, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. The list is endless. They changed music from entertainment to art, from singles to albums, from performance to studio creation. The Beatles are the standard, the peak, the band that all others are measured against. Number 1, always. Before we go, 5 bands that just barely missed the top 10 deserve recognition. The Doors, Jim Morrison's shamanic presence and the pioneering fusion of psychedelic rock with poetic darkness influenced generations of frontmen. U2, with 22 Grammy Awards, the most of any rock band, achieved touring success that made them the biggest band in the world for decades. The Clash brought punk to the mainstream, and London Calling consistently ranks as one of the greatest albums ever made. Metallica, the most influential metal band, brought thrash metal from the underground to stadiums worldwide. Aerosmith, the best-selling American hard rock band at over 150 million records, has a career spanning 5 decades. There you have it, the top 10 greatest rock bands of all time, backed by data, influence metrics, and decades of cultural impact. These bands did not just make music, they shaped the sound of generations, rewrote the rules, and created legacies that will endure long after the last amplifier goes silent. What do you think? Did we get it right? Who would you have ranked differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments, let's debate. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you do not miss our next ranking. Until then, keep the volume up and the classics spinning.